This is Euroscopic, a podcast brief about what happened this week, how we got here, and where we're going. I'm William Bluecroft.
And this is Martin Gack.
You can find this podcast and other essays at our Substack, euroscopic.substack.com. And of course, you can subscribe wherever your ears go for podcasts. Like, comment, share, you know the drill. If you like it, let us know, and a friend or two of yours as well. This episode was recorded on Tuesday, the 15th of August, 2023.
I actually don't really listen to anything while I'm cooking. I mean, it's just sort of a moment of zen. You know, it's just hearing things, sort of the beautiful sort of thrill of the frying stuff. By the way, I had you over for donuts this Sunday. What do you think of the donuts?
I think the donuts are the true breaking news story of the week in Europe. We should have taken a photo to share with our Euroscopic audiences of us in real life.
I actually have photos of the donuts. It's not
you
that
have photos of the donuts, but you don't have photos of us enjoying the donuts because we were having such a nice time in your apartment.
I actually was thinking after you left, because it really was a bit of, after my 20 years in the US and now 10 in Germany, it was really one of these full-fledged American morning experiences of sort of shooting the breeze, having some sort of very unhealthy sort of thing that you probably should have a snack of as a dessert, but starting the day with that. The taste of the donut was not quite in my mouth. It's like this sense that taste permeates everything. It's like the world that morning on Sunday morning was kind of getting to me through the donut, through this like sort of, this full experience. And this is something that I actually kind of have seen with displaced communities, funnily enough. One of them, my grandparents, who, my great-grandparents actually were Ukrainians and Moldovans, Jews that came to Argentina. And then, we had all of these sort of food traditions. Most sort of European ascended Argentinians, especially in Buenos Aires, actually do have that. That's why in the middle of summer for Christmas, we still eat very, very fatty foods that you would actually enjoy.
Excellent.
But you have this also, I've seen it, among Palestinian communities in which you have almost the land that they lost traveling with them in foods that they continue to prepare, even if those crops can no longer be obviously grown in many of the countries where they live. So there is something about this experience of having donuts, the communion around donuts together Sunday morning, which really was to me quite great in all of this.
And props to your, I believe both your wife and your children decorated those?
Yes. In fact, it was a request of my oldest kid to have donuts on Saturday. And we just had the conversation away from the mother because she would absolutely oppose. So she just walked into the kitchen to find a very, very large amount of donuts. There are, I think, 24 donuts that we pulled out of 3.5 cups of flour. And then he went on to spread different things of different colors on it, sort of like.
Well, they were truly a work of art and very delicious. And how many donuts do you think you consumed, Martin? I had 2, I think.
I am fairly confident that over the weekend I had somewhere close to 10 donuts.
Well, our bellies might be full of donuts, but definitely something that is not full is the media agenda. There's a massive, I think the whole of the donut is the media this week, which comes as no surprise because we are in the middle of August, and it's always just slow because anyone who is a newsmaker or a news teller is basically on vacation, and it really has no real interest in doing any real work, even if there are plenty of stories to go around. And that's basically our big story this week, which is how there's no big story, despite there being stories to talk about. And of course, a big one is migration at a number of levels.
Also, quick snippets on Russia and Niger, von der Leyen on vacations. Of course, that following the vacation topic, that von der Leyen was vacationing with Mitsotakis. She apparently accepted a private trip to visit Mitsotakis in Crete. And, von der Leyen is in a rather sticky position because, as a matter of fact, a lot of Mitsotakis' Nea Demokratia in Greece has really run a bit of a collision course with European values and, European institutions had been, particularly in Parliament, had been taking a close look at Greece and sort of the treatment of the free press, independent bodies. I mean, a lot of stuff that you would expect in considerably more right-wing governments, including, surveillance, illegal surveillance of the opposition and so on, have been happening in Greece, and there have been demands to actually investigate particular Mitsotakis' government, which of course runs a bit contrary with the idea of like the top of the European Commission just going to hang out and drink ouzo in Crete with Mitsotakis. I mean, it makes you think that the only thing that Orban did wrong to the European Commission was not to actually extend an invitation to go drink, wine at Lake Balaton. So Niger is still actually in the news. I think it's still sort of the most underreported and perhaps one of the most important stories still sort of happening.
Right. It's one of those stories. It's getting reported. It is in the news. People are waking up to the fact, and they have over the last couple of weeks, that this is not some local story far away, but there are major geopolitical issues here. Of course, Russia warning ECOWAS, and ECOWAS really is just a stand-in for Western powers. Since ECOWAS was kind of born out of the decolonialization or the post-colonial period, not to get involved. Of course, Russia is very much involved in those areas.
My reading is that every time that Russia says that something is not the case, for instance, participation in Niger, or the presence in West Africa, or the fact that they were willing to invade Ukraine, or the fact that they were bombing like civilian targets, or the fact that they were behind murders in the UK, and so on and so forth. Every time that they deny something, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's the final confirmation of the fact that they're doing it.
Yeah.
So I think that the interesting thing about the Russians warning ECOWAS was pretty much, don't come looking for us because we're there. This is potential a hotspot for a confrontation between either Russian proxies or Russian, say, friendly operators and Western friendly operators, not only repeating some of the patterns of the Cold War, but probably more important, helping to divert assets from countries that at this point would like to really just be concentrating on Ukraine.
Speaking of the Cold War, we saw that story this week, or criticism this week, about how I won't say Russia friendly, but certainly lukewarm on supporting Ukraine Austria is. Germany always gets the flack for this because Germany is just such a bigger country and a bigger player and a major arms exporter. But there are lots of other countries in the European Union that are not super hot on towing the pro-Ukraine line. And I say Cold War because, of course, Vienna was famous for being sort of this weird neutral city that was just where spies of all kinds on both sides of the Iron Curtain would run amok. And Austria still very much, in many formal and informal ways, kind of carries over this sense of neutrality, or the sense of not really taking sides and getting to fly under the radar, because although it's a rich country and right in the center of Europe, it is a small country and often is able to get away with things that, let's say, a larger country like Germany can't.
Austria very often looks like the Hungary that we can tolerate, maybe because they eat schnitzels and they speak German and so on.
The Austro side of the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that is the one that is just closer to the Bavarian border. The fact is that, even if you look at sort of the last couple of years, I mean, really 20 years of Austrian politics, they had also been dominated by either extremely reactionary forces, like Haida was back in the day, really one of the first fully bloomed far-right parties that became part of the political fold. You might remember Karin Kissin, who was the foreign minister of the previous Austrian government. She became famous, among other things, for dancing at her wedding with Putin, who came specially from Moscow to, dance with her, it seems. All of it very, very strange. But the fact, there was a report going on about a week and a half ago to 2 weeks ago that she actually had moved to Russia. You have a lot of political operators, a lot of politicians, some of them extremely prominent, like Schröder himself, who have very cozy relations, are very much embedded in the Russian economy, are very much beneficiaries of the Russian political system and the Russian sort of oligarchic distribution of money, and that then they turn out to also have massive amounts of power in their home countries.
And I think if we take even a step further back or look more broadly, beyond just the personal politics and the personal relationships between various European figures and Russian figures, people conveniently like to forget how intertwined Russia, that even to say Russia and Europe as if they're two different entities, I mean, is kind of ridiculous. Russia is part of Europe. Europe is part of Russia. The very idea of cutting off Europe geographically from Asia is fraught with all kinds of historical revisionism. That, you know, these are power players and elites who have been intertwined with each other for centuries, and those things don't just go away.
Anyway, there is also today the story that the EU will not negotiate with the UK a deal for returning migrants. The immigration policy in the UK is quite literally collapsing. Rishi Sunak has come into power kind of promising to stop the boats, as he put it. You know, the right does itself no favors beyond elections of putting out these slogans that they cannot really amount to policy, obviously. But again, they did. And now, obviously, they cannot really stop boats at all. So they're hoping that the French or in Brussels, the European Union will cut some sort of deal to return immigrants. The fact is that Brussels had quite simply said that they will not renegotiate that. They will not negotiate that. I mean, this is what you also get as part of the Brexit deal.
You know, the UK wants to treat the EU the way the EU treats a lot of countries on its periphery in terms of migrant returns, right? Send them back to Libya, send them back to Turkey, send them back to Tunisia, send them even back to Afghanistan, wherever they may have come from. And I can imagine the EU, in the way it thinks of itself, in the high-minded way it thinks of itself, does not like being treated by the United Kingdom as if it's some developing country on its periphery. I found that rather ironic.
Which brings us to our main story of the week, which is both the media hold, the media silence on all sorts of stories, and particularly around the question of migration, which continues to be sort of an ongoing and rolling disaster. And the summer has obviously underscored the necessity, both because of what we're just discussing, the British story, but because also the fact is that sinkings and people disappearing is happening week to week. As a matter of fact, since 2014 to the day, 30,000 people or thereabout have been calculated to have died in the Mediterranean.
Right, which is a stunning number, and it's even more stunning when you realize that's an undercount, right? Because there's so many bodies at the bottom of the Mediterranean that will never be found. So many families that will never be connected with their loved ones, will never know what happened to anybody that they might have known who've set sail across the Mediterranean. And there just seems to be no end in sight to this. This just seems to be, it's almost not a news story because it's almost like reporting that there's oxygen in the atmosphere, because it's just a constant situation. We know that huge boat sinking off of the coast of Greece earlier this summer. I mean, just a few days ago, we had 33 people. I'm just looking at this right now. 33 confirmed dead and missing in one boat accident off the coast of Italy. That's just a few days ago. I mean, just this week, you're looking at almost 100 dead people washing up on European shores. So the system is just, it is a humanitarian catastrophe.
You have countries that, at least in the context of the 2015 crisis, were really quite solidarious with these people, with people coming in. Is the fact that we are now in the face of a really serious political destabilization juncture, which could actually be massively exacerbated by another crisis of migration. This, I think, part of the reason why, places like Tunisia, places like Turkey, and so on have taken such an important dimension in the policy, because many of these countries have come to understand that having sort of a massive influx of migration could really just push very strongly in the direction of the far right, as it has happened in Italy, as it has recently happened in Spain. We still don't know what will happen there, but the far-right anti-migration right has constituted a bloc that has become politically relevant for a lot of center-right parties.
Media framing and political statements, on one hand, have to appeal to the humanity in people, to portray people coming into Europe, people looking, fleeing desperate circumstances, as humans, right, who are looking for a better life, who need a better life or need protection and safety. The problem is you end up, the downside, an unintended consequence, sometimes an intended consequence, but often an unintended consequence in the media framing, is that you get a very two-dimensional understanding of who these people are. They just get turned into these sort of touchy-feely, cuddly, imaginary tokens in the do-gooder imagination, and not understood as people with trauma, people with fleeing horrific war scenarios, people who might have severe psychological trauma, and that might come out in all kinds of dangerous and damaging ways for themselves and for the people around them. And so these people then come in on a basis of solidarity, on a basis of goodwill, like we saw in 2015. And then sure enough, of course, people are people. Within massive groups of people, like in a society, you have criminals. You have people who are psychologically disturbed. You have people who can't get jobs. You have all kinds of these normal issues. But because we haven't really had a nuanced picture of who these people are, that then opens up, that's cannon fodder for the far right to talk about criminality, to talk about, breakdown of welfare systems.
And I've seen this actually coming from very, well-established liberals, for instance, in France, or liberals in southern Italy, who they will tell you, I have been a long life socialist and I have fought for the protection of minorities, but I am actually facing sort of anti-white discrimination from Nigerians in southern Italy, or I am, sort of the stories in France are actually really considerably more extreme, because the Muslim community tends to be much bigger, and in some areas is completely dominant. Not only, I think, you have the problem that you just pointed to, which is that you have this sort of xenophilia, which is not better than xenophobia. You have the xenophilia that is not better than xenophobia, who also paints a tokenized sort of foreigner, which cannot actually then deal with the very serious and very concrete problems that the local population will have to deal with. And I think that what you end up with then is actually, first of all, what can be best described as a complete failure of integration, because in some sense, that is what it comes down to. But on the other hand, you have the dismissal of all these people with very serious concern as to how to negotiate these new demographies in their own homes. And you just treat them essentially as if they were, just essentially Nazis. I mean, wearing brown and like doing the Roman salute in the streets. In order to capture those, or actually at least you have a fighting chance if you belong to the center left, or if you belong to the center for that matter, with those populations, you need at least to be able to accept that these are things that need addressing, right? This is something that I think the left has actually completely failed at. What do you think is waiting for us in the week ahead?
Well, there was this interesting story about the Open Societies Institute looking to make a major restructure of its organization after it kind of got kicked out or fled Hungary, moved to Berlin. Now they basically want to get out of the EU, and instead redirect their massive resources. Of course, George Soros's gang of speaking of liberal do-gooders, like a gang of liberal do-gooders, want to redirect their huge resources outside of the European Union, which I guess you can see makes sense, because the European Union is a strong, rich place with strong institutions, and there might be other places in the world that need more help with their democracy, with media literacy, as we were just talking about. But still, the dangers, as we know, the dangers of the far right, the dangers of nativism, of xenophobia, of the work of a democracy, are very much at risk in the European Union. So I would be interested to see how, not that we need the OSI to save us, but they are a major player in this nonprofit democracy field. It'll be interesting to see how they develop, and what impact and what blowback and what the response might be from EU leaders and other people in this space, if they really do kind of get out of the EU work.
From my corner, I mean, I'm still looking at Spain. There is now a bit of a wrangling operation between the two parts of the left and the right of the Catalonians, of the Catalonian independentists, the Junts and the ERC, who are kind of at each other trying to decide what they will offer, what they will ask from Sanchez in order to keep him in power and stop the right and the far right taking power. And by and large, I mean, I'm waiting to see if people finally make it back to Brussels and to Berlin from their vacation spots, Greece or Italy or wherever else.
Which happens every summer, of course. And for those reporters like you and me left here, not vacationing, actually working, it's very difficult because I'm having the same issue where everyone's just on vacation. No one's around to talk to you, even if you do want to do work. So I believe next week's top story for us might still be how there's no top story because there's just this massive hole in the news agenda. Although we'll see if there's any more decisions coming out of the chancellery here in Germany about these prize Taurus cruise missiles that are the next big ticket item that Ukraine wants to follow up the British cruise missiles and I believe the French cruise missiles as well. Of course, my big question is how does an air force or how does a military that has almost no airplanes in its air force make use of an air-launched weapon? Nonetheless, that might be something for next week to keep an eye on.
You've been listening to Euroscopic with William Bluecroft and Martin Gack, written by us, produced by us, and edited by me. If you liked what you heard, like us, subscribe to us, leave us a comment, tell us what you think, and share us with a friend. You can find us at Substack, that's euroscopic.substack.com, and our podcast wherever podcasts are heard. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.